What is the best diet for mental health? My name is Dr. Ruth Dutton. I'm a board-certified adult psychiatrist, and I'm a metabolic psychiatrist, which means that I look at the overlap between mental health and metabolic health because the two are so closely related. And of course, diet is going to be super important for both of these things. So the short answer is that I don't think that there's one diet that across the board is best for everyone for their mental health. That being said, I do think there are some principles that most people can agree on. So the first thing I would recommend is the elimination of ultra-processed foods. These are going to be those foods that come in a package. They have a long list of ingredients, and those ingredients are probably consisting of words that you can't read. These foods tend to contain refined sugars and carbohydrates, as well as seed oils. And these ingredients can contribute to things like inflammation, oxidative stress, and growing insulin resistance. And these are some of the root causes of mental illness and things that we can pretty easily address through our diet. So I would recommend that everyone work toward eliminating ultra-processed foods and shift their diet toward more of a whole food diet. That being said, there may be individuals for whom it's important to leave a little space for those ultra-processed foods or treats because it may lead to unhealthy eating patterns if they restrict them. So I'm thinking about people who may be in an active ED. But at the same time, there are others who may be struggling with ED behaviors who find that restricting those foods enable them to abstain from those unhealthy ED behaviors. So it really comes down to the individual. So beyond that, there are a lot of different dietary patterns that people could try. There's a lot of evidence in favor of using the Mediterranean diet to improve mental health. So this is a diet that consists of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, olive oil. It even recommends red wine. There's plenty of data to show that this is superior to the standard American diet. That being said, it doesn't really take into account people who may have insulin resistance or blood sugar issues because it is relatively high in carbohydrates. So another dietary pattern you could consider would be a paleo diet, which consists of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and meat. It's trying to go back to our paleontologic ancestors and eating how they did, thinking that that's a more species appropriate diet. This eliminates things like grains and legumes, which can have a lot of antitoxins or contribute to gut issues in some, but it does not have to be carb restricted. I've also talked about the benefits of a ketogenic diet, which isn't necessarily any specific diet, but it's more a way of manipulating your macronutrients to turn on fat burning rather than carbohydrate burning mode. And this can be really beneficial for people who have serious mental illness. Of course, it can be quite restrictive, so it's certainly not for everyone, and there can be risks associated with it. But for those for whom it's safe and effective, it can really be life-changing. There's also a carnivore diet, which is basically the ultimate elimination diet. I think that this is helpful for people who tend to have a lot of sensitivities, maybe some autoimmune disorder issues, and it's a good way to try and eliminate everything at once, and then you can slowly reintroduce things to see what is tolerated. Now, there aren't studies to show if this is safe or effective long-term. There are people who have anecdotally been on a carnivore diet for years and years, but we just don't have data on this. I usually think of it as a short-term elimination diet that would gradually be expanded as tolerated by the individual. There's also animal-based diet. It's kind of like a carnivore diet, except that it includes raw dairy and fruits. The idea behind this being that fruits are the part of the plant that want to be eaten. That's why they're sweet and colorful, and that these tend to have fewer plant toxins as opposed to vegetables, grains, and legumes. I think of this diet as being good for people who, again, have a lot of sensitivities and can't tolerate a lot of foods, but maybe they're younger, athletic, they don't have insulin resistance issues, and so they do better with a little bit more carbohydrate in their diet. Other than the carnivore and animal-based diet, these other ones you could also do as a plant-based diet. It's important to keep in mind that if you're on a fully plant-based or vegan diet, that there may be things you need to supplement, like vitamin B12, but there also may be things that you need to supplement if you're on a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet. At the end of the day, I just recommend experimenting and see what feels best to you. If you're going to do something like keto or carnivore, I would do that under the supervision of a medical provider. But most of these other diets are going to be relatively low risk to try, and you can mix and match, just see what works best for you. I personally eat a low oxalate diet that consists of fruits, vegetables, meat, and dairy. And that's what I tolerate best. So that doesn't fit into any of those categories. If any of these sparked your interest or you want to learn more, feel free to ask your questions in the comments below, and I'm happy to talk about each of these dietary patterns in a little more detail in future videos. Wishing you all good mental health today, and I'll see you in the next one.